You're listening to the Marketing and Yoga Pants podcast, a podcast in sisterhood for female entrepreneurs that serves up savvy, actionable marketing advice and interviews with creative business owners who are in the trenches, building their businesses as we speak. The Marketing and Yoga Pants community is for you, the girl on her couch, in her yoga pants, top knot tight, hunched over her MacBook, trying her hardest to get the word out about her business. So in the name of supporting each other while supporting ourselves, bringing community, sound marketing advice, coffee, chocolate, and wine together for you, yoga pants wearing business owner, in a world where followers mean nothing, but paying customers mean the world, join us on this week's podcast episode and in our private Facebook group where you'll meet your soul sisters and build your business in yoga pants. Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing and Yoga Pants podcast. I'm Brit and I'm here today with Taylor Bradford, Boss Girl Creative. Thank you so much for joining me today, Taylor.
Thanks for having me, Brit.
I have been waiting to have Taylor on the pod. I don't know why it's taken this long, honestly. And Taylor and I met back in May of 2017 in person. And I have to tell this whole story, Taylor, if that's okay with you, because this is literally my favorite story of meeting any internet boss girl in real life. Like, there's no better story than this one. So I'm just going to roll with it. I'm going to try to keep it short. But here's the deal. I, along with 3 of my business friends from my local area, we went down to Waco, Texas, just for a fun girls trip in May of 2017. And we were down there. I went with 2 photographers and a wedding planner. And while we were down there, they scheduled and put together a couple styled shoots. And so one of the days that we were there, we went to this new barn wedding venue near Waco. And it was a collaboration. So the photographers, the wedding planner, they had contacted someone to bring in really beautiful vintage rentals. There was a makeup person, there was a model and her husband. Like, it was this whole thing. And so we get to this barn venue and this adorable little thing hops out of this rental truck and starts unloading her vintage rentals. And I immediately recognize her and I'm like, wait a second, I know this girl. I don't know how I know this girl, but I totally know this girl. And then finally someone introduces us and it's Taylor. And I had been following Taylor and her podcast, Boss Girl Creative, since I was in my corporate job. Like, I had listened to Taylor for a long time, knew her voice. I love her voice, just side note. But I got to meet her in real life totally accidentally. And so we got to just kind of hang out on the lawn while the styled shoot was going on and just talk about podcasting. And at the time I don't even think I had started this podcast. It was just kind of an idea. And bumping into Taylor was such a sign for me that this podcast had to exist. And it was just a super cool moment. So all of that to say, Waco brought us together. Here we are again, and I'm really pumped to get to chat with Taylor today, get some insight into her businesses, multiple. She has multiple. She is a true boss girl here. And her industry, her marketing strategies, and what makes it all tick. So after all that, Taylor, you ready to jump in?
Oh, I'm so ready to jump in.
Okay, let's do this. All right. So first of all, we have to understand, how do you earn your living?
Well, my day job, I hustle a lot. And I have what I would consider right now side hustles with the other jobs. But I do have a day job, so majority of my money is coming from that. However, that does give me creative freedom. I have some expendable income, basically. So it gives me creative freedom to explore in a way that maybe I wouldn't be able to explore these other things that I do. So I have a blog. It's taylorbradford.com. It's a life-inspired blog. And then I have a podcast, Boss Girl Creative, which just released number 170 this week. So 170 episodes. It's over 3 years old. I'm so pumped about that I'm at 170 right now. And it teaches the nitty-gritty of blogging and social media and how to grow your online empire. And so that's that. And then I have a wedding business, which I offer event rentals and I also offer event styling and event design. And so the goal of those three things, Taylor Bradford blog, Sugar Creek event rentals, and also Boss Girl Creative, is to eventually surpass what I do for a day job and become my day job. Because what I do for a living is not creative at all. It is quite boring. It's a lot of research. I'm in the oil and gas industry. And all of these other things that I do that give me life and bring so much to me personally in so many ways, I want that to just blow my day job out of the water so that I can just solely focus on these three things. But right now, this is life. This is where I'm at. And I work so incredibly hard to keep those three things going.
Yeah. So, right there, I want to camp out there for a second. Take us into the mindset that you have right now around blending your full time job and your creative endeavors and choosing to set boundaries around, okay, once the income from my side hustles surpasses my full time, that's when I'll go. But in the meantime, I'm here. Like, take me into that mindset. I mean, I know my story. I didn't do that. That was not my story at all. I left my job without a business and just decided to start one. It just, I don't know if I would have done it that way now that I know what I know, but take us into that mindset, especially for someone who might be listening right now and she's on her way to her day job right now. She's listening in the car. She's coming home from that day job and she's kind of frustrated with it. Like, just can you speak into that listener right now?
Absolutely. Obviously, I have to figure out how to pay the bills. And so I've been fortunate to be in this industry for as long as I have. And it's kind of gravy money at this point. I've gotten to myself to a point where I make really good money and it does support these things that I get to do in my creative time. But it's not easy because, and also I'm a contractor, so I don't go to an office and sit there for 8 hours and mingle with people. I legit wake up, make a chai tea latte on my Keurig, and go into my front bedroom and start looking through my emails and picking up where I left off the previous day. Now, saying that, because I am a contractor, I have flexible freedom as to when I get my day job done. So yesterday I had an open house to attend as me Sugar Creek event rentals. And so that meant that I had to stop work at noon and go get all my stuff packed up and head to Fort Worth. So I live 35 minutes out of Fort Worth. And basically that was my night. So I had to leave my house around noon to go get ready for that. And so that means this weekend I make up the day job. And so I have to look at my calendar each and every week and know what my expectations are for each day. Like, okay, I can get a full 8 hours in here. I can only do 4 hours here because I have a commitment with one of these creative hustles. That means I have to make that up over a weekend. I need to block that out here. I'm such a type A person and I am such a controlling person that it has to be planned out. Otherwise, I won't do it. But knowing that I do have the freedoms to, if I were at an office job from 8 to 5, when I got home and I got everything I needed to get done, maybe some laundry, get dinner on the table, whatever, then I would work on those side hustles after that until midnight or 1 a.m. I'm a night person. I'm not a morning person. So all of that work would happen in the night hours and I would just do it. And that meant a lot of sacrifice. It still means a lot of sacrifice because there's times where I'm constantly working, but I am so incredibly driven to make these creative hustles surpass that day job that I am going to continue to do that so that I can get there because I can't get there without it.
Yeah, you said it. You are so driven. That definitely is in you for sure. And let's be clear, you haven't always had the flexibility of working your full time job at home. For what I understand, a pretty long time, you did go into an office, right? So, was that a negotiation that you made with your employer to work from home, or did you switch jobs? Like, how did that come about?
So when I first got into this role that I'm in, actually worked on the road full time. And so I would go out on a Monday and come back on a Friday. And so Monday through Friday, I would either have to get into a courthouse wherever I was traveling, and then I would be in a hotel in the evening. And so I actually still had freedom at that point because I didn't have to come home and babysit my spouse and do laundry and all of that. So there was a lot of flexible freedom even being on the road. Now, back in 2016, late 2015, early 2016, I had to take some time off of my day job, and I took 9 months off because of a car accident. And that changed because it meant I was home full time, and I'd been on the road since 2011. So 4 solid years of having this type of schedule, and then coming home, and now I have to take care of my husband and take care of our house. And like, my world really changed, and I really struggled with that a lot because I couldn't figure out, where am I going to fit these things? I had this schedule for so long. Where am I going to fit these things? And it took me a while to figure out that new balance. And then I did take an office job, but I was still a contractor. Unfortunately, this company required me to go into an office, even though they legally couldn't. I needed the job. There was no other job in my industry at the time. So that was kind of, I have to have this, so I have to follow these rules, even though they're illegal rules. And so that was another level of, oh my gosh, now I have to report to somebody and be in an office for 8 hours. And that added this other level of, I still don't know how I'm going to balance all of these things. And I eventually figured it out. I eventually figured out what that balance was between me getting there, me focused on that, and me getting home and taking care of household things or whatever. And then I found that time again. So it's been a dance for sure. And I've never been perfect at it. Like, a lot of people are like, golly, you seem to be like doing it all. How do you do it all? And like, what you see on the internet and what I present is a completely sometimes different story than how many balls I'm really juggling in real life. And so I'm not perfect. It may appear that way through Boss Girl Creative, Taylor Bradford, Sugar Creek Event Rentals, but like, I'm still a very human, and like, maybe laundry doesn't get done for a week, and then my husband's like, hey, can you do some laundry? So like, it's still a work in progress, and it probably always will be until I can walk away from the day job. But I know that, and I give myself grace, and I give myself, that flexibility to be like, you know what? I don't have it today. And so today's just not the day.
Yes. Oh, girl, preach. We could just like mic drop and be done with this now, but no, we'll keep going. So I want to get an idea of this timeline here. So when did you start your first endeavor? I think it was your blog, but I could be wrong. When did you start that? And then where did the other entities come in? Because it's not like you just one day decided, I'm going to start these 3 businesses. It grew. And so where did it start? Why did it start? And then where did the other pieces come in from there?
Okay. So back in 2011 is when I went on the road full time for my job. I went out to Midland, Texas, which is way out West Texas. There's nothing out there except for Midland and Odessa, and a lot of oil and gas. And so I went out there, and I had to live in a hotel room for 3 weeks at a time, and I knew nobody. My industry is predominantly male, and that's great, whatever, but I had no female interactions whatsoever, and I was bored out of my mind. And so I actually had previously started a blog back in 2008 and kind of dabbled in blogging after I stumbled on the Pioneer Woman's blog and became obsessed with her and her blog. Like, I read her entire back catalog and thought we would be BFFs if we met in real life. And so I revamped that blog I started in 2008 and just started a lifestyle blog and started blogging 5 days a week. And I realized I was so enthralled with the nitty-gritty of blogging and growing that platform. Like, at that time, blogging wasn't where it is now. And so there was no Instagram. Facebook didn't have Facebook groups or Facebook pages. Twitter was around. Pinterest hadn't really gotten started yet. And so it was still very ground level. Like, blogs had been around for a while, but not as they are now. And so I started a series on my blog called #blogging education. And I started teaching the things I was learning about blogging. and the things I was learning about Twitter and things that I was learning about fill in the blank. And I built that over a few years to have over 40 lessons. And I'll never forget, in the fall of, I think it was 14, is when I heard my first podcast. It was Amplify Podcast. And I had, obviously I was listening through speakers in my ears, so earphones, and I was like, wow, like I love teaching. I realized that through that series. And I was like, wow, this is a medium that I think I can do. I didn't have a clue how to start a podcast. I didn't have a clue as to like what that was going to take. But I was like, I'm going to do this because I can get behind a microphone and I can share everything I'm still learning and everything I will continue to learn. And you will be able to hear how passionate I am because I'm able to bring my voice to the table. It's not just my fingers telling you what to do. And so I bought a course on how to start a podcast and figured out all the technical things behind getting that ready to go. And then in the spring of 2015, I enrolled myself into B School, Marie Forleo's B School, which is a creative business school that's online. And right before I started B School, I came up with the concept of Boss Girl Creative. I came up with the name. I didn't have a clue what that was really going to look like. I knew there was going to be a podcast component to it. I thought there would be some kind of a community component to it. And so I went through Marie Forleo's B School, and it helped me lay that foundation. And at that point in my blogging world, typically as a blogger, if we came up with an idea, we would just ask our friends and then make it happen. And then it's like a 50-50 crapshoot on whether or not it would take off. Like there was no other marketing strategy or launch plan or any of that. Like nobody was talking about any of that. And so I came out of B School and I was like, now what do I do? And I stumbled into Fearless Launching by Anne Samoilov, and she had this launch roadmap. And I was like, this is my missing piece. And so I went through her Fearless Launching program and literally day by day worked on launching the podcast and the community. So July 1st of 2015, I launched Boss Girl Creative as a podcast and a community, and kind of the rest is history. Now, where the wedding business kind of popped in was back in 2014, the fall of 2014. A friend of mine and I got together. I had done her baby shower and kind of went way over the top and spent a lot of money that I shouldn't have spent. But I created this beautiful baby shower, and with all these things that I collected and curated for it specifically. And we got together and we were like, hey, let's think about, what can we do with this? We really both enjoyed hosting parties, throwing parties. And so originally she was like, let's get into regular rentals. And I'm like, I am not storing traditional tables and chairs. That sounds like no fun whatsoever. I'm like, but you go do you, girl, like if that's what you want. And so then we started talking about vintage stuff. And between the two of us at that time, when we sat down and wrote down everything we had 300 items between the two of us. And we're like, this is kind of like a no-brainer. But we weren't thinking weddings. We were thinking baby showers, bridal showers, tea parties. That was the route we were going. We had no clue there was an industry that could be supported in the wedding business. And her photographer, her wedding photographer was like, hey, I really think you guys need to start networking with wedding industry professionals. I think this is going to help get you off the ground. And that's where that business blossomed. The moment we started networking with other wedding industry professionals and them realizing what we had was the moment that we entered into the wedding business. And so cue forward into April 2017, we actually parted ways. She moved. I rebranded myself into Sugar Creek Vintage Rentals. I actually just did a recent name change to just say Sugar Creek Event Rentals. But that's kind of where it started, was a love of vintage things, a love of antiques. My mom had several antique booths growing up. My dad was an auctioneer. And so I was always around them. And that's kind of just where it just allows me. I love throwing parties, don't get me wrong, but being able to bring a bride's vision to life with unique pieces, like I can't even explain how that makes me feel.
Hmm. You are a creative through and through. I love hearing how that has come about. And I wonder, it makes me wonder because I recognize that you are multi passionate for sure. And to me, it seems like you probably have all the ideas, lots and lots of ideas, and you execute on some of them. I think in a really intentional way. So I want to ask, how do you personally do that? Well, is that true? Do you tend to have all the ideas and you kind of have to triage to figure out, okay, which ones am I going to execute? Which ones take a back burner for now? And that. So, how does that happen for you? And how do you personally do that? And I'm asking specifically because just this past week, I've seen a few threads and comments about having all the ideas, feeling too scattered, getting distracted with your next best idea, and then not letting the old idea really flourish. So, take us into how that looks for you.
Yeah, so when I come up with something, if I think that there is any merit to it, then I do start going down the road of exploration. So the best example I can give you is actually out of the wedding business. So I've been in this now almost 4 years. Next month will be 4 years. And so over the last nearly 4 years, I have seen with wedding industry publications, I've seen a shift. And that shift is traditionally we would do these styled shoots, which is how Brit and I met. We would collaborate with other wedding vendors and create something beautiful, something magical, and then we would try to get it submitted into a wedding industry publication, either online or in a magazine. And unfortunately, that's changed recently, probably over the last maybe 6 months to a year. They aren't accepting those styled shoots anymore. They are really pushing towards real events and sharing real events. And I completely understand the shift and the why. And what I see is the why without asking these people. What I see is the why is that our magical styled shoots are not as tangible as real events. And they want their brides reading their publications to have a little bit more tangibleness aspect to them. So if it was real, that means that bride paid for those services. So if that bride paid for those services, then other brides should be able to pay for those services, etc. And so, as a designer and as a stylist, I start thinking about how do I bring that to the table, because I still need to figure out how to build out my own portfolio. I need to be able to attract my ideal client. How do I do that if my brides that are hiring me now are maybe they have a lower budget, or maybe they are only renting a couple of items from me, so it's truly not a showcase of what my rental collection actually is. So in order for me to show off what my rental collection actually is and my design services and my styling services, I have to still dream big and create these things. But how do I get them published so that I can become either nationally recognized or locally recognized or regionally recognized, whatever? So my conclusion or my answer to that is I need that real component to these magical things I'm creating. And so my first one came down the pipeline. I started thinking about this probably last fall, and I started asking some of my wedding vendor friends. And the original concept was, what if I got a team of vendors together, and let's say a florist brings to the table, she's willing to charge 2 grand for maybe $10,000 worth of services. It wouldn't really cost her 10,000, but she would actually charge that to a client because that's her level or whatever. And let's say a wedding planner comes on and their typical package for what I'm asking them to do is, 15,000, but they're willing to come to the table for X amount of money. So basically curate a team of vendors all to come together and say, we are going to offer an elopement package for $10,000, but it's going to be, your elopement is going to be a value of 75,000, and create a business model from that so that we are being able to still creatively come out of the box with these beautiful ideas, but it's not going to cost what it would cost if we were all hired by that person to create that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that was the initial concept. And I'm like, okay, but I got to have proof in the pudding. Like, I can't just be like, oh yeah, give me 10 grand. I'll distribute it amongst these vendors and we'll give you $75,000 worth of an elopement. Like, I got to have a concept, a proof that it works. And so I didn't initially step out and launch that because I didn't think that that was going to go very far, even though I thought, wow, this would be a really good idea. I have to start somewhere else. And so through those months, I kept kind of like coming back to this idea. And I was like, how do I make this work? And so I landed on it this past April. Actually, I started planning way before April, but the actual concept happened this past April, where I created a styled shoot that had a surprise vow renewal component to it. So we found a bride through a vendor friend of mine who had a courthouse wedding. She never got the wedding she actually wanted. And so she convinced her husband to be a model for this styled shoot, knowing that she was going to renew her vows. And so I created this surprise vow renewal for her. Again, it allowed me the creative freedom for the design. It allowed me the creative freedom for the styling. All the vendors that came on board knew it was a surprise vow renewal. The husband had no idea. He just thought he was coming to be a male model as the groom. And so we literally surprised him with this vow renewal. We brought in family members. We brought in an officiant that they both knew, he had actually been an officiant in this guy's wedding. And as she's walking down the aisle, and I couldn't have scripted this better. As she's walking down the aisle, he hollers across the courtyard at her and says, "This is the wedding we never had." And he didn't know at that point that this was legit. She was about to renew her vows to him. And so she gets up there. We bring out the surprise officiant. He's like, oh, like I can see the wheels turning in his head. Like, okay, maybe this is something more than I think. And she leans over after the officiant gets set and says to him, "This is the wedding we never had." And like, then the family comes out and like, I mean, it was beautiful. It was magical. And it's getting published in Green Wedding Shoes in a few weeks. And I am like, so incredibly pumped that I was able to take that very first idea that I had no clue how I was going to do proof of concept. And this is the stepping stone for it. So I have some more in the works. I've got a vow renewal contest going on right now for a couple. Entries are happening right now. And it's another concept. Now this, obviously they will know they're getting vow renewal, but it allows me to continue to build on this idea of eventually potentially getting to that original concept.
Oh my goodness. First of all the chills. Like I had major chills as you were telling us that story. Thank you so much for taking us into that. And brilliant idea. I mean, totally brilliant idea. And the thing that I take away from that is it's rarely immediate execution, especially as a big idea person. It's not, I have this big, huge idea and I'm just going to pivot and go for it. I mean, sometimes that is the answer, but most of the time it's, how can I just get curious about this thing? And how can I pull little pieces of that in and experiment with it? If this doesn't explain what makes your whole life tick, I don't know what does. From my perspective, it's that long-term commitment to the process and getting to the result that you've dreamt for yourself, not expecting it to be a microwave and it's like, okay, we're done, we're there, results, goal set, okay, we're here. It's okay, this is my goal, it's a big one, I want that so bad, and I am going to commit to the long-term process of getting there no matter what.
Yes.
That's Taylor. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay, so give me a peek into what you're working on right now and maybe what you're looking forward to, come 2019 for each of your entities here. What's the vision we've got going on?
I finally feel like for a while, I really thought my blog, and it did, just to be completely honest, my blog took a back burner when I took that day job where it required me to be in an office. Like that was the one piece that broke. And I came to terms with that because my podcast wasn't going to break. I am so committed to the podcast. There's been an episode every Wednesday for 170 weeks. And that was something I couldn't let fall through the cracks. So I had to keep that up. So something did break. It was my blog. I went from 5 days a week blogging for 6 years to maybe once a month blogging. And something sometimes just has to give, and you do have to come to terms with that. But I knew eventually I would figure out where it would fit back in. And I finally have that picture, although I feel like I'm in a holding pattern at this particular moment, which actually was this week's podcast episode, which is super beneficial with me being in the trenches. My podcast and what people hear me talk about is typically what I'm going through. And so this week's podcast episode was about holding patterns and like, what should you be doing in business if you are stuck in one? So I'm stuck in one because I have my city not issuing me my building permit because I'm actually expanding, creating a warehouse for my business. I'm building a workshop. I'm building a petite event studio, very similar to Chippy White Table, which I know you're friends with.
Oh,
Um, yes. And a showroom and a podcast recording studio. And like, I feel like I'm got my wings clipped a bit right now because my city is, throwing some bureaucratic tape at me. But the long term, I can see it. So this petite event studio will be able to host workshops. I will be able to host my own Boss Girl Creative workshops in my own studio. I can host intimate events. I can host, whatever in this small space. And then I have my warehouse where my brides can now come in a heated and cooled space and get to play with the items that they are thinking about renting, or I can stage them before they arrive so they can actually see things in person, how they could possibly be set up for their day. And like, there's all these great things. And the shift I'm making with the blog will be more tablescape concepts, so I can really bring my style and design into my blog, which has been completely lacking just because I didn't have the space for it. I didn't have the
right.
space to just be able to I have this extra room and I can set up a farm table and I can create this, lavender themed table to encourage people to think outside the box when it comes to decorating their dining room or whatever. And so full circle, I can see all of these pieces now coming together because of this new space I'm creating for myself. And so that is 2019 is the year that it all finally clicks into place. I have myself in a podcast recording studio because now I record in the comfort of a small closet and have been for 170 episodes. And to be able to know that I have a dedicated space for the podcast just lights me up. To be able to know I have a dedicated space to photograph my inventory, to be able to know I have a dedicated space for workshops, to be able to know that I have a dedicated space to continue to build the backdrops that I build is just, it's lights my soul on fire. And I can then see in the horizon, I don't know how far out that is, but in the horizon, I can see this switch from where these 3 side hustles become my day job.
Yeah. It sounds like all of this long-term commitment is somehow in its own time, without forcing it, they're clicking together. Like they're
Yes.
coming into this rather than 3 separate entities, like this one really nice group hug. That's so cool. And if nothing else, I think, Taylor, you've done something even within me. And for sure, if it's happening for me, I think it's happening for many of our listeners too. This reminder that we're playing a long game here. This is a
Oh, yeah.
really, really helpful reminder. I feel like I'm in a holding pattern right now as well. And it's not comfortable because as a mover and shaker, you want to be moving and shaking, right? Like that's your comfort. Whereas some people really like to stay, stable and secure and all that. Well, as an entrepreneur, that's not usually your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is out there doing things, trying things, experimenting, moving forward, this and that and the other thing. And when you find yourself in a holding pattern, it's your city kind of being like, not really
Yeah,
doing the thing you need them to do.
yeah.
For me, it's this sabbatical that's going to be amazing. And it takes me out of my comfort zone of waking up, sitting at my computer and working. and like getting things done for an entire month, right? And so that feels like kind of uncomfortable, but also good in that everything happens in its own time, as long as you can remember that we're playing a long game and not a short one. So thank you so much for that reframe, just personally for me. And I'm going to extend that thank you from all of our listeners that are listening right now. And they're like, yes, I needed that reminder too. So I want to finish out here, and I would love for you to look back and tell us, what advice would you give to yourself when you were first starting your business, all the way back in 2011, that girl on her couch, or maybe the bed of her hotel room, hunched over her MacBook, trying to figure all of this out? What would you say to her?
Do not give up and keep trying, because what works for somebody will not always work for you, but you have to find your sweet spot and what you can bring to the table. And you have to know what your why is. If you do not know what your why is, you need to check yourself right now and really dive deep into what your why is, because without building a foundation for yourself, you cannot get yourself enough far forward to really bring your dreams and goals to life. You have to build that foundation at the very beginning. And if you are already in the trenches and you haven't figured out your why, you need to stop yourself right now and start figuring that out. Because again, brick walls will just keep coming up in front of you because you don't know what your why is. So you might be turning in circles for a while. You might be in a holding pattern. You might be fill in the blank. If you don't know what your why is, you have to figure that out ASAP. I didn't know what my why was in the beginning. I was just bored out of my mind and I needed a creative outlet. I know what my why is now. That's why everything that I do, even if I'm still like throwing at a random fly trap, trying to figure out if that's going to work, I know what the end game is. And so I may not exactly know the right course right now, but I know what that end game looks like. So I am working really hard, still trial and error to get there, but I've got the foundation because I know what my why is.
Yep. 100%. Thank you so much for that. Okay, before we go, could you please tell the listeners where they can find you online?
Absolutely. So bossgirlcreative.com is where the podcast lives. I do have a Facebook group attached to that you can find through there. And then taylorbradford.com is the lifestyle blog that will eventually in the next year have a beautiful revamp of the content that shows up there. And then also sugarcreekeventrentals.com is my wedding business. And then if you're looking for me online as far as Instagram goes, it's at Tay Bradford blog.
Perfect. All right, you heard her, girls. Go check her out, send her some love, and then hop into our private Facebook group to hear even more from Taylor over the next few days. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Marketing in Yoga Pants podcast. Keep the conversation going by visiting marketinginYogaPants.com/Facebook, where you'll get to join that private Facebook group I've been talking so much about. There, you'll get to chat with our podcast guests. Yeah, they're in there too, and all of the other brilliant creative business owners. We're connecting, we're meeting our soul sisters, and we're building our businesses, all while in yoga pants. So come hang out with us. Again, visit marketinginYogaPants.com/Facebook to get in. And one more thing. If you dig this podcast, would you be awesome and share it with someone? This entire Marketing in Yoga Pants movement is nothing without its community. So please share. And if you're really feeling the love right now, jump into iTunes. You're probably already there if you're listening to this right now. And leave us a rating and review. The more of those we rack up, the more the podcast will be found by ladies like you, and the stronger this community becomes. This episode was edited and produced by the Podcast Engineers. They're pretty great, so go find them at podcastengineers.com. This episode was also brought to you by my online marketing agency, Jam Marketing Group, and you can find us at jammarketinggroup.co. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you back here next week on the Marketing in Yoga Pants podcast. Love ya. Bye.